Right, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to this very special session, to the launch of the Family Business Histories case study series, actually. My name is Farida Al-Agami. I'm the General Manager of the Tharawat Family Business Forum. And I have a great honor and privilege of being joined today by our keynote speaker, Mr. Tony Jashanmal. Mr. Tony Jashanmal is president and member of the board of directors of the Jashanmal Group and has been instrumental for us to be able to put together the case study that we will be introducing to you today. Our other speaker today is our partner in this project. It's Professor Martin Klimke. Martin is the Vice Provost for Academic Policies and Governance, Acting Program Head of Literature, Creative Writing, and Program Head of History and Associate Professor of History at New York University in Abu Dhabi. Today's session should be a very interactive session. So we would like to encourage you all to ask your questions, engage with us. We will do our very best to get to most of the questions that we receive. If we don't, we do apologize in advance because usually it's not possible to answer everybody, but we try to also club the questions according to the themes to make sure that we do address the main points that will come up. So feel free to ask your questions. You can use the Q&A function in your Zoom window to ask us any questions you would like to ask. From a program perspective, what will be happening is we will do a short introduction about our project, and Martin will take over from me in a short while. And after that introduction, we will go to the main part of this session, which is an interactive conversation with Mr. Tony Jashanmal, where we will debate and discuss some of the points that we have discovered through the work of this project. I would like to say that it is a very special moment for us as a project team, because it is the first big milestone after 3 years of collaboration between NYUAD and the Tharawat Family Business Forum. So it's a true privilege. Thank you so much for all your interest, and we are looking forward to getting started. So Martin, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Farida, and thank you very much for all of you for joining, and especially our guest for this inaugural launch of our case studies, Mr. Tony Jashanmal. It's an honor to have you with us today. So as Farida said, we've been working on this project, for the past 3 years, and it's a truly unique partnership between the Tharawat Family Business Forum and all its members and NYU Abu Dhabi. So we've been very, very blessed, with this being, a grassroots initiative, an interest that came, from Tharawat members as well as the academics at NYU Abu Dhabi, who came together in partnering on trying to really understand the nature and the significance of family business history in the MENASA region. So I think our mission statement is really, encapsulating that particular trajectory. We would like to compile, document, and analyze the history, legacy, and the socioeconomic impact of family businesses in the GCC and MENASA region. And, our case study today that we'll be talking about, Jashanmal, is a fantastic, start for this, because all of these elements that we'll present today, will fit wonderfully, in these categories, especially also in the connection between the larger society, the national context that we're going to be talking about, and the development of the family business itself. So that's really something to think about. For those of you who are part and members of Tharawat, this will come as no surprise, but for those of you who might not know about family businesses and their significance, we put together this particular slide that gives you an idea of the percentage of family-owned businesses in the private sector all across the world. It is very, very big. It's a large sort of percentage, of the economic sector, the private sector, that is run by family businesses. And that's always something, for us to think about, because part of our project is really also distilling, the true unique features, the distinctive features of family businesses in this part of the world, as opposed to a lot of case studies, a lot of literature that is dedicated to family businesses across other parts of the world. And also, one of the things that always comes up is, how old are these family businesses? And in some cases, they're really, really centuries old. And I think what's always surprising to people is that companies like Samsung, LG, Swarovski, or Mars, that people don't typically associate, with family businesses are actually, family businesses and have been around for quite a while. And this is, from our perspective, a very interesting phenomenon that is global in nature. And we'd like to compare and contrast and again, distill the unique features of these particular forms of economic governance, and family capitalism in this region. So in a nutshell, our goals with the project have always been to understand the history, of these particular family businesses in their environment that they grew up in, to highlight their legacy. A lot of these family businesses are still active or have lasted or have contributed to the formation of the cities, the countries that they're part of, to preserve their heritage. And this is where our collaboration with the NYU Abu Dhabi Special Collections, the archives, the library, the Center for Digital Scholarship, and the Center for Photography, ACASA, comes in, and also seek actively the outreach to and conversation with members of the family business community, in and around the MENASA region and globally, and thereby try to sort of be inspired about the future, especially in challenging times like these. This is one of the goals, and that's why we want to sort of, move this forward. So to sum up, I think we want to get to Mr. Jashanmal as soon as possible. Family businesses are really the pillars in many ways of MENASA economies. Their sustainability plays a crucial role to the regional stability. What we'll see today also in the case study is that the vision and joint purposes is really crucial for the transition and the sustainability of family businesses. And the historic understanding and the shared identity really carries, these businesses from generation to generation. And especially the question of succession, and internal governance is crucial in this regard. So in many, many ways, again, especially in situations like these where the economic challenges are very, very clear to everyone. It is an opportunity to learn from the historical challenges that especially, the founders of family businesses have faced, and that's the focus really of our project so far. And as I said earlier, it's really thanks to the, grassroots initiative and interest. So a quick preview. Today, as I said, we published our first case study. So you see the case study will be available, on our website after this webinar. We're going to add more moving forward. So this is just the beginning. Stay tuned for more. This is also embedded in a larger international scholarly network, where we connect to other academics and family business practitioners around the world. And we'll hopefully in the coming month roll out more webinars like these, workshops and seminars. So the educational component is really, really crucial. We were planning, before the pandemic hit, an international conference on family businesses in MENASA in global perspective. But obviously we have to revisit, given the COVID-19 situation, these plans and figure out a new time. But this is probably going to happen in the coming fall or the year after. But that's really the goal. So it's the dual trajectory, having an active conversation always, with family business practitioners, and having that particular conversation embedded in a larger research effort, in a nutshell, for our family business history project. So let's start, I think, to get a little bit of a visual and audiovisual flair, I should say, of the case study at hand. So a trailer for the Jashanmal Group, please.
Why don't you open a nice Indian shop in Basra? Because we go there, we don't have really any Indian shop there. So it was the British troops who were going from Karachi, which was India, going to Basra to go to Palestine exile. My father decided to go and open the shop for the British in Basra. And he opened the shop in Basra in 1919.
Then when they found oil, they asked us to come to be the first shop because we were already in the area. So that's how 1933, 34, it was in Kuwait. And then in 1935, it was in Bahrain. Whatever it is, I know how to get along with people. I know how to look after, to survive. I'll get along.
So the late His Highness Sheikh Rashid visited Bahrain, saw that there was a marketplace, saw that there were stores and stuff, and he actually visited our store, Jashanmal and Sons, and he said, "This is a nice shop. And I would like to have a shop like this in Dubai because they have goods that I know my people would like to buy for their home. And in those days, we were a general store. We sold everything.
Thank you so much, Farida. So basically, we want to launch, this conversation with Mr. Tony Jashanmal now. And I think for those of you who have not had a chance to learn more about the history of Jashanmal, we put these particular images, on the slides, just to give you a sense, of the geographical diversity and spread of the Jashanmal family business from India to Iraq in 1919, Kuwait in 1934, Bahrain in 1935, and then coming to the UAE in the mid-50s, establishing a shop in Dubai that you see a picture of, on your right in the slide, as well as coming to Abu Dhabi in 64. So my first question then would be for you, Mr. Tony Jashanmal. Could you give us a brief understanding of the business and the founding history, and in particular, what is the context, for the foundation of Jashanmal and Sons, and how is it embedded in the larger international and almost imperial history at the time?
Well, the start of the business was in 1919. We're talking about a year after the end of the First World War. Iraq, like Jordan, like Palestine, like Lebanon, like Syria, 5 countries which were formed at the end of the First World War. They were part of the Ottoman Empire before that, but were created as 5 different countries after the Allies had won the area. Now, Iraq had the potential of oil, but also it had its duties to do in Iraq, Jordan, and Palestine, which were the 3 countries which came under British protection, while Syria and Lebanon were under French protection and administration. So there was a lot of traffic coming into Iraq and further on to Jordan and Palestine. Now, you remember at that time, India was ruled by the British, or was part of the British Empire, and it was a developed society there. So the closest and easiest development of Iraq, Jordan, and Palestine was actually from India. So there used to be basically ships coming with goods, people, military supplies, all coming from the Indian subcontinent through the Arabian Sea and the Gulf to the only port that there was in Iraq, which was Basra, and everything, the further development in the area basically originated there. At that time, my grandfather, or Mr. Tharawat Jashanmal, who was the founder of the Jashanmal family business, went with a few friends to Iraq just on a visit. During the visit, he found that Iraq would be developing very fast. One, because of its oil, and secondly, because of its strategy of being in that part of the Middle East and from where supplies had to go in to the other countries there. He started with this opportunity along with his brother and opened a store in Basra, from where he could supply goods and services to the British families and interests, mainly the army, which were coming into Iraq to basically help the development. His store became successful. He opened another store in Basra. All was well until the early 1930s, when the oil produced in the United States, Iran, and Iraq was not anymore just sufficient to supply the increasing world demand. So the looking for oil was expanded down south of Iraq, first into Kuwait, and partly into Bahrain, which was on the sea route to Iraq. The British administration in Iraq convinced Mr. Jashanmal to open a store in Kuwait. You have to understand, although Iraq was a country which was developed constantly from the 3,000 and 2,000 years BC, Kuwait was actually just a desert. And so there wasn't a modern, or for that time, a modern society available there. So the store was a very important addition to the economy of Kuwait, and especially for the people who were coming in from the UK and the United States for the development of the oil industry. Now that became the blueprint, and wherever oil was found down the Gulf, or not wherever, but in some of the places where oil was found, it was either the British administration there or the local, like in Dubai, it was Sheikh Rashid, who had seen our store while visiting Bahrain and had convinced the family to open up in Dubai as well. So our family history is basically attached to the development of oil in the Gulf. And in the places where we opened, we were the first general store with goods basically from the West.
I think, Mr. Tony, if I may interject quickly, I think this is one of the parts that we found as the researching team, we found so fascinating, is that direct link between, let's say, the macroeconomic developments of the region and then how the entrepreneurial reaction was that your family had. Because I think that is something that sometimes when we look at family businesses today, we maybe know the last decade of the development, but if you look at it from an arch perspective, from a big picture perspective, there is always that influence, that impact of the macroeconomic factors. So maybe as a first question to go into, you've now sustained 100 years of this organization, which is honestly amongst the older ones within the region, which is a very impressive number. What do you think, based on the history that you have been through, what were some of the key factors that made your family sustain this organization for such a long time?
Well, one of the main factors was that you develop a relationship in these new areas with the local people and with the local royal families, and you become a part of the society. Especially in the early stages, you are few foreigners who come to these new areas. And once you get integrated, you become part of that civilization there. That gives you a feeling of belonging there, rather than belonging anymore, or not anymore, but as much as to the countries where you originally came from. And so you feel totally a part of that area, although you did come from somewhere else. Right? We've had this as an example with a lot of other people who were here, even as professionals who came here for the to develop or help develop the oil industry or the electricity or the water systems or whatever systems. And they came from other countries and were here in the initial stages. Many of them actually never went back to their countries of origin because they were so much at home and so much integrated into the life and the lifestyle even of the countries over here.
I mean,
So
that ability, I think that ability of becoming part of the local makeup must also say something about the character of the founder. Would you agree with that?
yes, I think if you start as a business in new areas, which are virgin areas where that type of business didn't exist before, you become much more a part of that society because a lot is demanded. Not a lot is demanded from you. You demand a lot from yourself. Is one. Secondly, you had to have, because it's such unknown area, you had to have a pioneering spirit. In business, we see all around the world, there are the pioneers who start the businesses. And when they're established, etc., then many others come in who are probably already in that business in other countries, and then see this as an additional place to be in. So there's a difference between the type of character of the person who's the pioneer.
I agree.
Because he's going into a much bigger unknown than the one who decides afterwards, you see. So
I think what's also striking to me, if I may, Mr. Jashanmal, is that there are two things. I think, there's one is the sort of business concept, of, penetrating these particular new markets with a new concept that is a general store and that is also very, very customer focused in terms of, trying to then take orders for products that are not available locally. So that I find is a very, very interesting thing. So could you care to comment on that and how that sort of carried over in the history of the family business?
Well, in the case of our businesses, as I said, the countries I'm talking about, whenever we started in any of those places, they were administered or very much aided by the British government. So in many cases, the help for the armies, the police force, to technical things like the starting of the electricity and the starting of water systems, etc. That was all done in collaboration with British companies and British groups. Therefore, in our case, was the same, that our contact through the British government and British friends, our contacts and our imports for the products, as you know, was nothing of that sort was produced here. But all those products actually for several years after the start basically came from the UK. So it was this collaboration of people who were helping set up everything here. So part of that was also businesses like ours. So we automatically started with the import of British products. And for a long time, till today, we still handle many of the British products, many of the companies which we nearly started with at that time. A good example I'll give you is that don't forget we were in desert countries, and with so much desert around and so much heat around, the only shoe that was practical in these areas was the Clark's desert boot from the Clark's company of Great Britain. Now, our collaboration with Clark's goes over 60 or 70 years. And till today, in all the countries where we are the people who handle, that means we retail and we distribute Clark's products, including the old original desert boot, which is still quite popular. That was the only thing that could last and was practical in the desert at that time.
Yeah.
And that goes, and the same thing goes for other products. We have with the Hoover Company, with other companies, which in different fields,
Right.
originated in the UK at that time, but we and whom we deal with still today and represent still today. So.
Well, I thank you for that explanation. I think that's a very good example of also how really, as you said before, relationships are at the core of what you have been able to do, and also are at the core of what you have been able to sustain. Now, one of the questions that we discuss a lot in Tharawat is, how can you transfer that capability or that ability of one founder to create a fantastic network, to create relationships that are of trust, that are of strength? How do you then transfer that to the next generation and to the next generation after that? So my question would be a little bit perhaps around governance. We actually have a lot of family businesses on the webinar and from all over the place, very international today, so welcome everybody. And I know that sometimes these questions come up. How do I make sure that I can maintain what makes me strong, which in your case definitely is the relationships, the values, but how do I then institutionalize that into an organization and into the family behavior and culture? So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your governance journey.
Well, that's interesting, not only in our case, but it would be probably very similar to many multi-generational business families, that you start with one founder. In the case of my grandfather, Mr. Legacy Jashanmal, the founder, he had 5 sons. One of them went to university in Canada and decided he was not going to enter the business. The other 4 entered the business. My father, who was the eldest son, joined my grandfather quite early and sort of assisted him and learned from him directly, and set up Kuwait also, for instance. Now, one of the things was that in the Gulf, it was always felt in those early days that you had to build up quite a personal relationship, whether to the royal family and to the local people. It had to be very personal, as the person who owns the business or from that family is actually there. That builds only, that is a way to build a trust between the people.
Sure.
So, so our expansion, therefore, was that my grandfather was in Iraq, and then my father was in Kuwait. And my grandfather started Bahrain, but he retired. And then the second son came and was there in Bahrain. So there was a continuation of a family member there. When the third brother was ready, he was put into Dubai, because that came at the right time when Sheikh Rashid had invited us to come to Dubai. And the fourth son was in Abu Dhabi. Had he had 20 sons, we would have been in 20 countries by now, but from that time. We can still expand now in the modern day, but that's in a different way. But at that time, it was at the start of all these countries that it went. So each place ran with quite independently.
Okay.
With a family member being there and running that area or that country business individually. One of the reasons for that was, in those days, communication was not like today.
Sure.
There was no,
well, yeah, of course.
Forget internet, etc. We didn't have airports. we didn't have a proper telephone service. So you had to leave each place to its own.
Right. That's an interesting, that's quite an interesting element actually that we researched as well in the case study, which is maybe in today's mindset a bit different, because we do see that conglomerates who expand internationally have a tendency of being quite centrally organized, whereas you actually managed to grow this fast and this geographically diversified because you decentralized certain things. But how did then people stay true to, because there must have been things that linked them, right? They were four brothers. What would you say drove them to stay in sync with each other?
Well, you did have some connection, and the one connection which was there was they still did meet once a year or twice a year. We still did have ships going in between, and I must say the airlines between some of the places started also again in the 50s and then into the 60s, etc. So then it was easier for them to get together. Right. But for a long time, it was just each place on its own. Once it was possible to be together or to work together, actually, that's when the collaboration again started.
Right.
And you started seeing it at time with more and more as one company and being run as one company. Right. That started basically in the 1970s, when we basically, at that time, Bahrain being probably being the most developed of the countries in the Gulf, we sort of built our headquarters in Bahrain, and that's where we would meet.
Right.
So that, and joint policies started being taken, etc. In 1980, between all the companies in the Gulf, we decided to make it even closer as a being run as a single group or as a company, and that was in 1980. The policy then at that time was, until then it used to be quite patriarchal. The eldest brother was after my grandfather retired, the eldest brother was sort of the patriarch of the family. But in the 1970s, in 1973, when or in 72 and 73, when a cousin of mine and I both joined the business, we were the third generation. And the question which had come up as to how do we deal with the next generations to come. Because up to that time, it was one person, then it was four brothers, but now you're talking third generation. You automatically knew that the geography basically changes.
Yeah.
You're dealing now with cousins and uncles and, and the governance rules, etc. That's when the modern governance came in.
Okay.
And not only modern governance, but that's when it was not strictly a family business where the ownership was all totally shared. No, that was then brought into a formality.
Right.
So
you were quite early. You were quite early in formalizing your governance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was good foresight.
Right. Yeah.
As to how do we do the next generation. I must say, we all got together in the family house in Bahrain, and it was a 2-day meeting of family members. So now I'm always proud of that, because we didn't have any consultants or anybody to tell us. We said we'll go about it as it feels right.
Yeah.
And what was the right feeling is that we've turned the joint family business into a shareholding business, where each of the four brothers were given 25% of the company, And second thing that was done was that members who work for family who work in the company will be given their salary according to the job they do. Third thing, we set a limit as to how much the dividends would be a year and how much would be plowed back into the company. And the third and the fourth thing was that the operational part of the business will be run by professionals and not by family members. Family members would form the board, make the policies, etc. But operationally, you had to have professionals who ran it.
I mean, that is really, I have to say, that is really, even in today's times, that is pretty visionary to do that this early on. I'll just quickly interrupt. I'd like to encourage our audience to ask any questions they would like to ask. Obviously, Martin and I have about 2 hours worth of questions still, but don't worry, we will stick with the time limit. But I don't know, Martin, if you have any questions.
Well, I think we just go by the order that came in. So I think, Mrs. Jashanmal, the first question that came in was, could you tell us a bit more about how the family maintained links with the Indian subcontinent after 1919, and particular with the area that after 1947 became Pakistan?
Okay, that's quite easy. Although parts of the family or the family home was still kept on in Karachi, what is now Pakistan, the business was in the Gulf, but there was regular communication there. There were younger members in the family. There were no schools, no English language schools in the Gulf. So people always went to India, to school and to universities. Not only people like us whose families had come from India, but many of the business family children from all the Gulf countries used to go to India. At that time, you could say the ones who could afford it. Now you take it that every Gulf family can afford to send their kids nearly anywhere they want. But in those days, the few business families and ruling family members who wanted to be educated abroad would go basically to India, to school and to university. Don't forget, that's where the shipping lines used to work with. A little later, towards in the 70s and the 60s, late 60s, 70s, people started going also to the UK. But up to that time, and many people were this. So this way, the roots were kept there. There were some family members, not of our direct family, Jashanmal family, living and working there. But you had, other family members by marriage, etc., who were there in India. And India was the easiest place to visit in those days on holiday as such, because that's where the ships were going. But my grandfather retired in 1948, mainly at that time to look after the education of his children who were yet not of the age to come and join the business. So he retired. His wife had unfortunately died quite early. And so he took on this responsibility of looking after the children and therefore retired quite early, as you can say, for his age, but mainly for the children. Now, him being there, the family was also attracted often to go because he built a big family home in India. And this is where the picture that you saw earlier with That was my grandfather and 5 people. That was a picture of the ruler of Kuwait at that time, Sheikh Abdullah Salem, visiting my grandfather at his hometown in India.
That's very interesting. And I think, I mean, one of the things that we learned is that because your grandfather retired and did look after some of the children, the transmission of his values actually continued into the 3rd generation, because there was that FaceTime, let's say, with the founder, which would you say that that helps until today to keep the cohesion of the family?
Yes, I think, first of all, which I have seen and have been part of many of these studies, that if you have a family business which carries on over several generations, it only does this not because of the success of the business itself only, but also because of some strong values that the founder had. And those values are drummed in, first of all, into his own children and then passed down further. Mm-hmm. Some people get more of it and have, let's say, we're listening more in their youth than others. And so they get a better feeling of what the basic values were. And I think this is what pertains a lot in our family, because apart from just running the business and growing the business, there were other values that my grandfather had, which was very, very strong, which was that he said, you are part of the society. You are not alone. You work and do whatever you can also towards the society you live in, because everybody has their job to do in society. The priest has his job, the doctor has his job, the teacher has his job. Our job is to bring goods and services for the community. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have to spare time, apart from your business, to spend time in doing and helping in the services which the community needs in general, mm-hmm. like schools, like
absolutely.
Like playgrounds, like sports places and things of that sort. And he insisted that we should try and concentrate as much as possible towards education mm-hmm. and sport, which help develop people's minds and bodies. And that's why you would see that many of us, from the time we were in the early stages in each of the places, and even till today, that we are all involved in the community, and especially on the level of sports and of education.
I think maybe this answers some of the questions also around CSR and philanthropy, because people obviously were asking how you consider the role, or what you consider the role of the Jashanmal Group when it comes to corporate social responsibility and also kind of personal philanthropic activities. So anything you would like to expand on that?
Well, if you have that as a policy, first of all, in your own way, you'll get involved in it. Then it happens by itself. Then you're known as the person to approach if there is any problems with that sort. Whether it's starting a new school, or whether it is at the moment contributing as in any way you can towards, let's say, the Lebanese catastrophe at the moment, which happened. And I know that yesterday and this week, in this last week, we've been doing a lot towards Lebanon, for instance, and then you do towards the pandemic, and then you do towards a new area which is opening up, and you help towards the school, starting a school or whatever. But you are known to be a contributor, and you are approached, and you actually do so because it's part of your it's part of your philosophy itself. So.
That's very interesting. I think one thing that keeps coming up also in the Q&A is what is the back home dimension still to this day? Do you have on this particular note anything that you'd like to expand on with regard to giving back home, that is in India? That's number one. And number two, and that's a really interesting question, what is the role of language, in the family business history? What is the language? You talked a little bit about that in terms of schools, English, Arabic, Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati. How is a company that is so multinational, in terms of its manifestations, dealing with languages, both in terms of a family, but also in terms of a company?
Well, now, with us being here, first of all, because like I said, in the early stages, there were no English language schools, and we wanted to be brought up in all of that because of business and business connections all over the world. So people started traveling. And now, if I take people in our third generation, most of us would have, I studied a little bit in India at the early age, but otherwise, most of, even I and anybody who's younger than me, most of them studied in Europe or in the United States somewhere. And of course, then you meet people, then you mix with people, etc. The result has been that at the moment we have 15 nationalities and 5 religions in our family. Now, so, and most of us have were born and have lived in the Gulf all our lives. Now, through this, I don't think we see India as home. I think most of us see the place where they were born and have lived most of their lives very much as home. Then many of us are married people from all over the world. We see that partly as home because your wife is there. So the idea of home actually gets lost. You make yourself comfortable and whatever wherever you are. The society that you dwell in is not the one that you came from. It's not that I would only mix with Indians and be only in the Indian society. No, not at all. I'm the business council of the British Business Council, the French Business Council, the Swiss Business Council, and chairman of a school, in international school in Switzerland. I have to go there several times a year, so that is partly home for me. My wife is from Germany, so that is partly home to me, So, and that goes for just about all the members in the family. The good part of that is that you are not biased. You're not this. And when we get together as a family 2 or 3 times a year. And when we get together as a family, you've got everybody. You've got languages and religions and everything. I mean, we've not had a problem. Mm-hmm. So it's how you deal with it. You start actually. If you have so many people so close in different things, you actually become quite tolerant.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think
you don't want a problem because you're together,
Yeah, of course. And I think this is a very interesting question. We have quite a few 3rd, 4th generation family businesses on the call. And so I'll try to club some of their questions because I think they kind of relate also to this question of when there is this much diversity and this much, spread of the family, how do you stay cohesive? So some of the questions go around, do you have a formal governance structure? Do you have, for example, a family constitution? And also a question around how do you deal with outsiders in, for example, your board? Like, do you have non-family members in your board? And the final kind of aspect of that is, with all of that diversity that you have, how do you consciously transfer this to the next generation? So what is the culture of succession? And I wouldn't call it the plan or the process, but the culture of succession that you have instilled in your family business.
Well, we haven't had to install anything with any type of force or conviction. As you know, in most of the Gulf countries, there are laws of local partnerships that you have to have, etc. So we have many of our companies, only we have several companies as part of family business, but in most of them, we have also local members.
Mhm.
So we have that, and we do have what you might call it, what's
Board?
the word? Not a board only, an understanding between us, where we have a joint board for all our companies,
Okay.
and so we have having so many shareholders, have a joint board, and the board is chosen by the different people from different sides. So we don't only have today, not anymore. Up to the 70s, it was only family members, but now it is for good governance.
Yes.
We made it that the board should be people from the different businesses,
Right. Okay.
which we have different partners in different countries, etc. But that, because all of them, the idea was that all of them are business people themselves, experienced business people in the local area, etc. That you have this input. This input brings a lot of, I would call it discipline, because you're not only dealing, and you just don't have to make up or be good to family members or and things of that sort. So with these type of developments, it's developed and developing steadily and all the time to and actually unpartisan board at all.
Exactly.
So it's come down much more to the actual ways or the best ways to run a business, not to run actually a family business.
Which you started early already with your professionalization of the management, which was in
Exactly.
the 70s,
Exactly.
and you kind of now basically continue that in governance. So how do you still sustain the family spirit towards the business?
Well, you'll have that in that you might have some businesses between yourselves, because as I said, we all get our dividends, and each person therefore has his money from the dividends with which they can do something. There are some things where those people are together as partners, but the other main thing is that we still keep the same name as the business, and we do have these family meetings, which give a general feeling towards it. Although the main thing is actually on that part the business side.
Right.
You know, the business meaning run by the board, which is chosen by all the people. So we are family members together because we are all together in the same business still.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, we are shareholders in the same business. We do get together socially to keep family and the thing going, and we make it a point. We make it a point
that sense of belonging that you talked about as well within the family as well, right? So it's a psychological tool that you're using to.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So what you have to do is, when you become diverse into different countries with different laws, etc., then you have this. But all of us are still shareholders in this company, so we do have a joint interest. But your interest is being looked after at the business side by the best board that you can choose from your different partners that you have, we all have the same interests, and at the same time that you do develop other things outside just the business,
right,
to stay together as a family. So that's, and I think that's going to happen more and more internationally also, as borders, you know, as people are just mixing all over the world. You buy shares, or you buy even controlling shares in different countries all over the world. So, but that doesn't mean, and that's where, when you were putting up the pictures of the people in the world, those people also have other board members, etc., who run the business.
Of course.
You know, even outside governance. But it doesn't mean that that family is not together. I know the Mars family quite well. We've met several times, or the Gallo family, from the wine people in California, etc. All old families. But you know that their get together as family and keeping together as family is a lot, and has to be still a lot, outside the business itself.
And let me just maybe, follow up on that, because I want to be mindful of your time. I think maybe as a final question, we've talked a lot about, the strength of the family and the cohesion and the identity and values. And we've also talked about the challenges that are beyond anybody's control. We're currently in a moment of, serious challenge. And the business that you're representing has been through previous historical challenge, of all sizes and proportions in the various countries. So how, in your view, do you assess the nature of this particular challenge, with COVID-19, with the coronavirus that we're in, both economically, culturally, politically, and how do you think, what we've been doing in the last hour, reflecting on the history of individual family businesses, would help inspire potential solutions to address the current moment?
Well, I think first of all, this is a difficult time. Something like this becomes it's very difficult. It's difficult financially, and it becomes difficult psychologically too. So I think the best is always that psychologically, to get over the first part, which is the psychological part, that it helps that you are still so close to so many family members. Because of your joint business, you do get together, you do see each other quite a lot, etc. So that helps. A business can help you on your private side. And the second thing is, of course, your experience of so many years helps you how to keep the business in keel too. I would say I have seen here now the people who are probably suffering most are the ones who are new businesses or young businesses. The older businesses, they seem to be more stable. And one of the things that makes you more stable is that this is not the first thing of difficulty you've gone through. I was with my family in Kuwait when we had the Iraqi invasion, where I saw everything, all the work of 70 years, built up work of 70 years, totally destroyed and looted in 2 days. But you got down, you restarted working, you had strong principles, you got together, you helped each other. We recovered fairly fast. When I say completely back again in Kuwait, it took 6 years to come back to the same level. But the help was because there was the understanding of the family, there was the understanding of the other people involved, and you had your backup in all these other countries to help you get started very fast and get going. And that comes not only because you were in the business together, but you were the family, and you feel the family ties together too.
Of course. I think
so in the long term, it always helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key takeaway, of course, from from the current situation that we are facing. A lot of family businesses, obviously, having to really go through very, very challenging times, and having to face situations that we had not faced before, that we don't know how to manage sometimes, because they come from places that we did not anticipate. And I do think, Mr. Tony, that the resiliency, and I think this is why this project is really close to our hearts, is because it does show the strength and the resiliency and the importance of family firms, because there is this long-term perspective. There is this long-term commitment. If you say that, you know, you came back, basically something that you built for 70 years was destroyed in 2 days, and then it took 6 years to rebuild, relatively speaking, 6 years in a 70-year history is feasible. For maybe another business, it would be an impossible, you know, thought process to say it is going to take us another 6 years. So I think for the economic substance of this region, family firms truly are very, very important. And so I'd like to just, before wrapping up and thanking the two speakers, I'd like to really encourage you to go to our website. You will also receive an email with the link. Please go download the case study. I would like to really express my thanks to Mr. Tony, to the whole Jashanmal family. Actually, there's quite a few on the call today, so I'm really delighted to hear that. And I'd like to really express my thanks to the entire Jashanmal family, to everybody who's contributed to this research, because of course Martin and I are now having the cozy task of moderating this conversation, but there's a whole team behind the scenes that has done an amazing job in putting this together, not just this one, but the other case studies that are coming as well, obviously. And I'd like to really end with this idea of that talking about family business histories can really be very important for how we address the future. We are entering what we could call a new economy. I think the 21st century economy is going to take shape over the coming decade. It is just now that we have entered into really this next phase of development. But the fact is, family firms are going to continue to be essential for the economic development and growth of at least of our region. And I think we need to be aware of how we can use history as a motivator, as an inspiration, but also as a lesson of how we can go forward and prosper as a community in the future. So, Mr. Tony, I would really like to thank you so much for the time, the effort. We have spent a lot of time together in putting this profile together, so thank you very much. And of course, from our side, from the Tharawat side, always Martin and the NYU AD team. It's honestly a privilege, and it's one of our favorite projects just because we have such a great understanding of why this is important. So Martin, if you have any closing remarks.
I can second everything you say. I think the pleasure is absolutely mutual, and I also want to reiterate my thanks. I think sharing things, about your own family, about your own business, is sometimes based on trust. And I think I'm very, very grateful that you've given us that trust and that we've sort of used this particular, case study to launch our project, and engage in conversations, about the history and hopefully the bright future of family businesses across the region. So thanks so much, Mr. Tony Jashanmal, and thanks to everyone for joining us for the conversation today.
Well, I'd like to give my thanks to both you, Farida and Martin, for building up a friendship over this time. And thank you for inviting me to come and speak here. And I'd like to just say the last word that, we've seen that at family business conferences, etc., is that there's a bonding between family businesses and family. The feelings are the same. We will all learn the same, similar things or new things from each other. And I think that families are basically not shy. Multi-general families are not shy in speaking about their families because, again, family businesses do not survive if they do not stay together and if they do not stay strong together. It's a very important part in the family business, and they have to trust. They have to have a lot of trust between each other, and they have to be able to work together and help each other. So I think it's a good thing to keep going, Farida and Martin, and we look forward to listening to the next families too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for those words, Mr. Tony.
Wish you all the best. Wish you all the best with your program.
Thank you to all our attendees. We hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next session. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.